Well, welcome. I'm Thomas Dyar, Product Specialist at InterSystems, and I want to share with you some exciting capabilities we're offering in partnership with DataRobot, a leading automated machine learning platform. To help me do that, I have Duncan Renfro-Simon, a customer-facing data scientist at DataRobot here. Duncan, perhaps you want to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I fell in love with machine learning and AI several years ago, and coming at it from a background of software engineering. And at DataRobot, I have the privilege of working with customers across different verticals, but primarily in healthcare, helping them apply machine learning to get amazing results for their patients and their businesses.
Thanks so much. All right, so today we're going to talk about InterSystems partnership with DataRobot and show you how InterSystems IRIS data platform interoperates with DataRobot using IntegratedML, which is a simple SQL interface to machine learning systems like DataRobot. So when we're done, you should be able to see how easy this integration is and how easy DataRobot and InterSystems are making it to leverage your own data in ML-powered applications. So why is InterSystems tying up with DataRobot? Well, the main driver is that AI and machine learning is very important to businesses now, but it's also very hard. So problems arise for enterprises all along the journey from data to a machine learning solution, as you can see on this slide. So InterSystems IRIS's capabilities in data modeling, normalization, and integration, they certainly can help with many of the challenges that get in the way of these different stages of a project. But if you have that clean, healthy data that InterSystems helps make with you, and you add that and you feed it to DataRobot's best-in-class data exploration, model training, deployment platform, you get a complete and powerful solution. So this is really particularly true for heavily regulated industries, in which InterSystems really has a strong footprint, as well as DataRobot, and it is available in both software as a service, public cloud, and on-premise deployments. So I wanted to ask Duncan a little bit if you want to comment on some of these problems that you see enterprises having, maybe even in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they fall into two broad categories. So healthcare obviously is a broad field comprising, pharmaceuticals, payers, and providers. And across them, we really see, challenges with clinical care as well as more operational. So clinical care use cases are often things like readmission, predicting hospital-acquired infections, or other things of that nature. Whereas operational might be looking at things like no-show appointments, or predicting, for example, which members for a health insurance plan might become sicker in the next year.
Cool, very cool. So talking a little bit more about the partnership. So in many ways, InterSystems and DataRobot are very complementary. For example, DataRobot fields an army of customer data-facing data scientists like Duncan that complement InterSystems' strong sales engineers and our partner-centric approach. So as you can see, there's just a lot of synergy and a lot of great things that DataRobot and InterSystems could do together. So how do InterSystems customers use DataRobot with their data? So we have a couple ways. One is if you have a DataRobot account, you can enter your InterSystems IRIS like URL where your server is and your credentials, and DataRobot can pull that data directly there into their interface, and you can build models that way. Another way is to use IntegratedML, which is an all SQL environment. It's a turnkey system. It provides this kind of universal SQL interface to multiple AutoML engines, and DataRobot is one of those, and it's our premier kind of integration. So this universal interface to machine learning, it really makes model deployment and invocation extremely simple. So here you can see some of the workflow of how to use IntegratedML with DataRobot. So IntegratedML is written, it uses SQL, and it has three main steps. You create a model, you use a train model statement, and then you have a SQL function called predict or even probability to get the predictions back out of the model. So creating the model just sets up the problem, specifies a target column, and integrated ML uses the table info the information that it knows about that table to infer what the input is to the model. So it also, and once you do that, once you call train model though, it's going to already know all of those kind of inputs and outputs, and it sends that data over to DataRobot where a new project is created, and then DataRobot's autopilot is started, and then it goes into a whole bunch of process of data profiling and feature engineering and model training and selection. So Duncan's going to show you more about this process. But then once all that training is done and you have a model, then the user can back in SQL use the predict function and get results out of it. Anytime a user can switch over to the DataRobot user interface and monitor progress and inspect the models there. So that way you just get the best of both. You get a very easy to use deployment and application development environment just using SQL. Wherever you can use SQL, you can use these DataRobot models. But you also get all the power of DataRobot's interface and their deployment capabilities and model monitoring. So we're going to do a little demo at this point, and then we'll come back and kind of talk some more about how you might use these models that you build in DataRobot. All right, so now I'll show you a little bit about integrated ML and how it works. So here I'm looking at a table of data about patients' diabetes condition. The task is to predict readmissions from that data. So I've done a select star, and you can see a little bit of the data down here at the bottom. So, there's information about the age, the gender, different things about the visit, and there's even information about how many medications, how many procedures this patient has gone through. All information that might help, to predict whether or not this patient is going to be readmitted. And so also I can do a little query to see how much data is here, and we have 10,000 rows, as you can see. Okay, so using DataRobot, the first thing we want to do is specify that we're actually using DataRobot. And this is just a kind of a simple DDL function that just sets the configuration to go to the my DataRobot cloud account and going to create projects and models in there when I have data I want to train on. So the next step is to create the model. And we're going to create a model and we name it. We're going to name it here readmission 1 because I've already made a readmission data model that I'm going to be using. And we tell it what column. We have one column back in the data that is readmitted. And that's the prediction we want to make given a new patient that we don't see. And then we're specifying this table. Now, we're just giving DataRobot all the data. But internally, DataRobot's going to make training and test sets. And so when it makes a model, it's making a model that it's confident will do well on data that it hasn't seen before. So really, this create model doesn't really take any time at all. It's really just setting up the problem for the machine learning problem, telling the output column that you want and what the inputs are like, which it gets from that table. And then you actually train it with a train model. That's going to do the work of sending data to DataRobot and kicking off the process. So this query will take a long time because, well, we're running a training on this data set and creating a model and then actually deploying that model all in one kind of script. And once the SQL query completes, then your model's ready. So if we actually go over to DataRobot, we can see and manage projects. We'll see that there is a new project that's created. So there we are. That's the project that we have. And you can see already on the right-hand side, you know, a whole bunch of activities happening. The data's gotten over there, and DataRobot, it looks like it's creating those holdout data sets. So one cool thing is, what I'll do is I will share this project with Duncan.
Perfect.
Okay, so there I've shared it. And then I will pass it over to Duncan, where he can show a little bit about this data set, a little bit about the model we're building, and how DataRobot works.
And so what you can see is if we go to Manage Projects, we should see that project that was just shared with me. And we'll be able to actually look at that project, and we can see it running here. And we'll be able to actually take a look and see what's happening. So one thing that Tom mentioned earlier, but I want to emphasize, is we're running this on a public cloud, but this will actually work on your private cloud as well as on-premise. The second thing I'd like to mention is that you can see here is we're running these different approaches here on the right. We call these blueprints, and this is really the core of DataRobot. You know, DataRobot has about 500 data scientists and machine learning engineers, and what they spend their time doing is taking the best approaches they can find from their own experience, as well as the literature and public open source projects, and building those into our platform. So this is really how we democratize data science. We take the best building blocks, different approaches we can find. We have this kind of dynamic Lego kit, if you will. And then based on your data, which we can explore here, and your type of problem, we assemble the best possible approaches and test them out against each other. So it's a very powerful approach because instead of having to decide ahead of time, you know, which model should I use, what modeling techniques should I use, which generally requires a great deal of experience and expertise, you can trust DataRobot to try a number of approaches that might work and actually tell you which one performs the best. So as each model finishes, you can see it's deployed here to our leaderboard. Now, our leaderboard here is going to show you essentially each model ranked according to which one performs best on a variety of metrics. I won't go into these now, but just keep aware that there are a number of them that are useful for different types of problems, so you can choose which one best suits your use case. As each model finishes, you can see it gets sorted and ranked here. And then a nice capability we have is the ability to actually go in and analyze and see and interpret this model. So let's go ahead and pick on this one here. This is a neural network. I would say it's a deep neural network, except that it only has one layer, so it's not that deep. And what we can do is actually go in and ask this model, what aspects of your data are you focusing on to make your predictions? Keep in mind in this data set, we're trying to predict if a patient is readmitted or not. So what we can do here is we can look at the overall approach, or we can come in here and we can go ahead and take a look at what are the different features that matter according to this model. And generally, this is what various data scientists and analysts want to know, right? You know, we have this outcome, or we're trying to predict this outcome. What's driving that prediction? And then can we interpret that? Now you can see we have a bit of a queue going here, but that's not a problem because what we can do is actually increase the amount of compute we're going to use. So just by clicking this up arrow here, I'll actually be able to assign additional resources, and you can see we'll start processing these at once. Now, while this is loading, I also want to kick off another deeper analysis here. And so we'll actually be able to go through 1, 2, 3, these different ways of understanding what our model is focusing on. Now, while this is running, we can actually go back to our data here and take a look. One of the things DataRobot tries to make very simple and easy for everyone to do is actually kind of explore their data as well and get a sense of it. So here you can see a nice histogram of the number of inpatient visits that the patient has had prior to their current hospital stay and discharge. And on the y-axis here, what you can see is this is actually the association with our outcome here. So what this is saying, which is logical, is as patients have had more inpatient visits prior to their current inpatient visit, their likelihood of being readmitted increases. And we can go ahead and see the same relationship across all of our different features here. And what's really neat is here we see medical specialty, and we can actually arrange this here and actually see, for example, which medical specialties are most likely to have, from a statistical point of view, a readmission. So in this data set, it looks like both vascular surgery and radiology. Great. So now we've actually finished looking at our features here. So let's go back to our model and take a look. And so go ahead and make sure we're processing this. Great. So what we can see for our model here is we can see the top 1, 2, and 3 features. What our model is looking at to make its predictions are essentially these descriptions of the patient's diagnosis. And these are actually free text descriptions, similar to clinician notes and others. And we can actually look at a word cloud here to understand those a little more deeply. So if we go ahead and come up here to our Insights tab and click on our word cloud, we can actually look at the diagnosis here and actually see, based on the color of the word, that things like congestive heart failure, or it looks like myocardial infarction, are correlated with readmission risk, whereas things like benign or maybe some uncomplicated diabetic events are less likely to generate a readmission. Great. And then the one last thing I want to bring up here is let's go ahead and look at our prediction explanations. So the idea here is it's very interesting to see overall why our model is focusing on different areas. And we can even interpret the trend. For example, just like we saw earlier, what happens if we have, an admission for a certain medical specialty or to a certain medical specialty. But what's more interesting is at the patient level, for each individual patient, why does our model think that they are more or less at risk for readmission? And that's what this is designed to show. So here you see the readmission risk on this column for each patient with this ID. And then you see the reasons why that patient is more or less likely to be readmitted. And the pluses and minuses to indicate whether that is increasing or decreasing their risk. So for example, here we can see our patient is at risk because they've had several prior inpatients, several prior outpatients, and they had this diagnosis here as their tertiary diagnosis. However, you can see here, this patient is less likely to be readmitted. It turns out because it looks like they had no discharge disposition. Their secondary diagnosis was just looks like some kind of check-in with a cardiac device. And then here's their diagnosis code here. Great. So, once you have found a model that performs well, you can actually go ahead and deploy that model. And so what we see here is you can click on Predict here, and you can deploy DataRobot models in a number of ways. For the purposes of this demo, what we're going to do is actually click Deploy here, click this Deploy model, and this will actually generate a RESTful API endpoint that IntegratedML can use to query and make predictions. And so just to recap here, we've done in the last 10 minutes, we've really gone from raw data stored in the InterSystems data storage, and then we've gone ahead and used SQL to create a project, and then we've used the DataRobot web application to not only inspect our data and look for correlations and understand what's driving our outcomes, but we've also generated at this point 20 different models using the best of both open source and proprietary algorithms, ranked them against each other, chosen the best one, and then interpreted that model. And then not only that, we've actually deployed that model to a RESTful API endpoint, which you can see here. We're actually able to monitor across a number of different lenses and allow, again, IntegratedML to come back and call that to store it right back into InterSystems. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom.
So here you can see a query that now we can use this model by calling the predict function. And this is really actually relatively complicated query, but essentially what we're doing is we're using predict to get the prediction out, and we're showing it next to the actual readmitted column. And I'll just run it here. It is a relatively complicated query, so it's going to take a little bit of time, but nevertheless, it's only looking at rows in this data set, in this 10,000 row data set, where the prediction is not equal to the answer. So this is where the model did not predict what was in the data. And then you also have a probability function that we're calling that gives pretty much the confidence the model had in its prediction. And so with these kind of queries, you can dig in and look at different subsets of data. Anywhere that you can use SQL, you can throw in these functions. And it's a pretty powerful combination there of the rich machine learning capabilities in DataRobot with the analytics kind of view for analysts over in SQL, and where you might have all your data living, you might be building an application, just might be easier to use this integrated ML setup versus coding up using a whole bunch of code. So that's all I was going to show you. I think that now we can talk a little bit more about different use cases, different places you can use these capabilities.
Great. So that concludes the demo. But one point I'd like to make is what really kind of makes us so excited about this partnership is the ability to democratize data science. You know, our company, DataRobot, was founded on the idea that there'll never be enough data scientists to handle all of the analysis needs. You know, data is growing at such an exponential rate. And what's so exciting is with this integrated ML capability is analysts who are used to working in SQL and with the great InterSystems platform can then extend their capabilities and actually run data science experiments right with the tooling they're familiar with. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get more people involved in data science and really jumpstart your AI and machine learning efforts.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Duncan. Yeah, we're excited as well, and we hope that people really take advantage of this opportunity. So we showed a little bit about a healthcare use case there, you know, that was around readmissions, and that's very important stuff. But there's many other use cases in healthcare, as you mentioned before, when we're talking about some of the challenges to deploying machine learning solutions. As you can see here in healthcare, there's, as you mentioned, length of stay, and also improving medication adherence, really helping patients understand better how their actions impact their health, and machine learning can have a big role in that. But also, DataRobot is a general platform I want to mention, of course. All industries can take advantage of these capabilities. And capital markets is a big focus for InterSystems right now. So we'd like our audience to be aware of some of the types of projects that DataRobot has experience in. And these are just a couple. I'm not sure, Duncan, if you have anything you'd like to say about any of these other use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's so exciting again about this partnership is that, you know, we've had the privilege to work with some of the largest investment banks and asset managers. And so, you know, many of these use cases, particularly around dynamic pricing and some of the time series, rely upon a rapid throughput, extremely capable data platforms such as InterSystems. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in kind of modeling very short timeframes, doing lots of different models, and having the data infrastructure to support that. So I think it's wonderful that these two platforms are coming together.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and so, and there's a little link there. It's a really cool a thing on the DataRobot site where you can browse through a lot of different use cases in different industries. So, you know, that's really all we had to show and share with you, and just wanted to underline kind of the key takeaway of this session, we hope. You know, so InterSystems IRIS, you know, when you power that, some applications with that data, with DataRobot's machine learning powers, it really brings the best-in-class machine learning together with your data in a way that democratizes data science within your organization. And you know, and it works for everybody. You can have it in the cloud, and you can have it on premise, and get the full you know, integrated ML capability with DataRobot. It gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of power. So, you know, if you want to explore integrated ML and DataRobot, just contact your InterSystems team. We're rolling this out over the next year. We want to get as many people as we can using this, so don't hesitate. We also have a couple links here at the bottom to find out about integrated ML, and you can actually get your hands on it yourself. And I'll leave the last word to Duncan. Do you have anything you'd like to close with?
Yeah, one thing for me that's been the most personally rewarding is watching clients in healthcare and other industries leverage, some of their world-class data infrastructure, including, a platform like InterSystems, and then use that data they've been collecting for sometimes years to actually finally generate, real-world insights and models that they can apply to gain real business value out of. And one of the other exciting things we see is people sort of move from more of an analyst data engineer role and be able to upskill themselves to become full data scientists and really advance not only their own organization, but their career as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that is great. Well, thanks so much, Duncan. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure.